Mirëmbrëma miq, numri I të prekurve nga Alzheimer në të gjithë botën është rritur në një mënyrë të frikshme, duke u shndërruar në sëmundjen e shekullit. Me rritjen e numrit të prekurve, sëmundja pritet të kthehet në një problem të thellë shoqëror. Parashikohet në fakt që në vitin 2050, 1 në 85 persona të jenë prekur nga kjo sëmundje. Çfarë duhet të dimë për këtë sëmundje, për sëmundjen e Alzhajmerit, do të na flas sonte Eithne Keegan, e specializuar për Infermieri, master I shkencave në këtë fushë që vjen nga Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës, ka një eksperiencë të gjatë në trajnimin e infermierëve për sëmundje të ndryshme. Mirë se na erdhe në studio, Eithne.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Enela, for having me here today. It is a great honor to be able to speak to your people about Alzheimer's disease.
Në fakt është një temë shumë e përfolur kohët e fundit dhe jo më kohët e prekëm dhe bëm pjesë të këtij programi, por që ti do të na flasësh më gjerësisht. Së pari, pyetja e parë, çfarë është sëmundja e Alzheimer? Cilat janë simptomat?
Alzheimer's disease is a very complex disease. It can be very difficult to diagnose in the beginning, to figure out what's going on with the person. We see cognitive decline, we see memory loss, we see them not being able to take care of themselves any longer, more dependent on people. We find that in the diagnosis, when we're looking at the disease and the symptoms, you know, what is going on with them? A very dear friend of ours and of Radio 7, about 3 years ago, I noticed a decline in his cognitive skills and his behavior. This was a brilliant man, very intelligent, wrote many, many books on all kinds of subjects. He was a speaker, he was a missionary, he was just a very gentle, kind, compassionate man. And about 3 years ago, I noticed he was repeating himself constantly. And I thought, this is not like him. So these were the symptoms of the early onset Alzheimer's. And these, if we know what they are, it's easier to diagnose it.
Çfarë shkakton sëmundjen e Alzheimerit?
There are many factors that cause this disease. Basically, it's your diet, the inflammation, comorbidities, which is many different types of illnesses such as diabetes, heart disease, not taking care of yourself, not eating healthy, inflammation in the body that's caused by all of these factors. And then it causes 2 substances in the brain to change. One is the beta amyloid proteins, the other is tau proteins, and these cause clumps in the brain or tangles in the brain. So it causes a brain from a normal brain to an abnormal brain where it shrinks and gets smaller and the cells get smaller. So these things happen to people with Alzheimer's, the symptoms that I've just described.
Po, Eithne, si mund të bëjmë një diagnostikim të llojeve të Alzheimerit?
There are many different types of Alzheimer's. There's atypical Alzheimer's, there's dementia. Dementia cannot, it's not always Alzheimer's. In the diagnosis of it, we do cognitive tests. For example, I would ask you, what day of the week is it? What month is it? Who is the president of your country? What did you do today? how many children do you have? These are just simple questions, but people that have Alzheimer's don't remember the answers to these questions. So we see them changing and not being able to function normally. Also, we diagnose it by, watching their behavior, seeing what seeing them have memory lapses. For example, if you lived in a house for 30, 40 years and you put your dishes away in certain places, your keys in certain places, your knives and forks in certain places, and then all of a sudden you see them putting them in places that are not the normal place. So you know there's some kind of cognitive decline there.
Cilat mosha prek konkretisht sëmundja Alzheimerit? A ka kurim për këtë sëmundje? Është e shërueshme?
Okay, there is no cure for this disease presently. Alzheimer's cannot be cured. They are trying to do research on it constantly, but there's still no cure. Which age groups are affected? Mostly people over 65, older people. But there's also a young onset Alzheimer's. For example, a friend of mine back in the States, he is only 50 years old. And we noticed these changes in him, the cognitive changes, asking questions repeatedly. And we noticed something was different with him. So we started checking, and he was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's. So young people. Mm-hmm. But the amazing thing is these things start 15 to 20 years before it's actually diagnosed. So in other words, how old was he? Mm-hmm. If he's 50 now, how old was he when it was first started and nobody noticed? So that's the sad part of Alzheimer's disease.
Cilët janë disa nga faktorët e rrezikut të Alzheimerit?
The risk factors for Alzheimer's are things like diet, not exercising, not eating a healthy diet, which causes inflammation in the body, medications, side effects of medications, they can be a risk factor. Diabetes is a risk factor, kidney disease are risk factors. There are many risk factors involved, but what actually causes it is a number of different things. For example, they are saying that in your stomach, when you eat certain things, it affects your stomach and your intestines, your gut, they say. So it's a leaky gut. And that's where things leak into other parts of the body and cause inflammation because you haven't been eating a healthy diet, you have a lot of stress in your life, many factors happen.
Cili është ndryshimi ose dallimi midis Alzheimer dhe demencia?
The difference between Alzheimer's and dementia is any syndrome that manifests itself in three main sets of symptoms: debilitating cognitive decline, lower independence, not being able to take care of themselves, and behavioral changes, whilst Alzheimer's gets worse over time.
Mm-hmm. Kam dëgjuar për disa shtylla të shëndetit të trurit. Cilat janë ato?
Taking care of your brain. Okay. So, taking care of your brain, you need to do physical exercise to make your brain more active and get that adrenaline going and the dopamine and the serotonin inhibitors working so the brain is more active and doesn't shrink. So many brain exercises, for example, playing games, doing crossword puzzles, doing activities like bingo. I think you have that here, bingo. Things that actually make the brain more active. And even for me, as I'm older, doing things, keeping that brain active, teaching, traveling, reading, keeping an active lifestyle, socialization, being with the family, getting out, not isolating inside, getting adequate sleep, getting your medical conditions under control, stress reduction, nutrition, and then, of course, clinical research, because that is the only way that we can see what's going on. So the clinical research will help us understand the disease better and hopefully one day get a cure. My colleague who's on my board of HCF is an expert on Alzheimer's disease. And he has written a book, and I've worked with him for a number of years on clinical research, memory tests, and so on, to help diagnose and research the disease.
Po. Eithne, cila është shenja e parë që ne duhet të dallojmë tek një i sëmur me Alzheimer dhe duhet shkojmë në spital?
Memory changes and behavioral changes. It doesn't necessarily mean that you go to the hospital, but you need to go to your doctor. You need to let them know and have them do the memory tests, like what time is it? Simple things. Can they read the clock? Can they read words? Those are signs and symptoms something is going on. But the doctor will look at those cognitive tests, and he will ask, what have you been doing? Are you under a lot of stress? Because that could cause it also. What's your lifestyle like? Are you working? Have you seen changes? And also bringing a family member alongside you so they can understand what's going on, and educating the family member as well on what's going on. Because a lot of times, people who have Alzheimer's, the wife or significant other or partner will often compensate for them. In other words, answer the question for them. So other family members or friends will not realize what's going on.
Dhe a ka mjekime, a ka ilaçe për ta mbajtur nën kontroll Alzheimerin, ndoshta jo për ta parandaluar, sepse the që nuk shërohet, por që të mos agravojë më shumë kjo sëmundja?
There are some medicines like Exelon, a patch that they use, Namenda. There are a number of different medicines that they use that might slow a little bit the disease, but they have not found anything to date yet that actually will control Alzheimer's. That's why the research is continuing. They've come out with a new drug called I can never pronounce it. Let's see. The old ones were Namenda, also a combination of drugs, Namzaric, which is names in the United States. I don't know if they're similar here. Cholinesterase inhibitors, Aricept, Exelon, Razadyme. Now they've come up, they've approved monoclonal antibodies that target the amyloid beta and the tau proteins. But unfortunately, they have noticed in this particular drugs they've been helping, but it causes bleed in the brain. That's one of the side effects. So it's very difficult. You can't just give it to anybody because of the risk factors involved. So there's nothing really that helps Alzheimer's. It slows it a little bit, but not a lot.
Si duhet ta trajtojmë Eithne një të sëmurë që mund të kemi në shtëpi me sëmundjen e Alzheimerit?
that's very difficult. It depends on the type of Alzheimer's. There are different types. If it's dementia, Alzheimer's, if it's atypical Alzheimer's, if it's Lewy body Alzheimer's with Parkinson's disease, that is the most difficult one to care for at home. This one, a friend of mine, she was about my height, and her husband was 6'4", and very timid, very compassionate, very caring man, and he had Lewy body disease. Mm-hmm. This caused agitation, this caused anger, this caused him to become violent. So his wife was trying to take care of him at home, but when I went to visit, I noticed her with bruises, and I wondered what was going on. I asked her, but she was such a wonderful woman of God. She didn't want to complain. She didn't want to say her husband was violent with her. Until one day I noticed that when I was there, he threw her against the wall. So I saw this change, but she compensated for it and didn't talk to others about it. And I had her go to my friend, Dr. Young Trin, for an evaluation. And they evaluated him with Alzheimer's Lewy body, which was very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Çfarë na këshillon si mund të bëjmë Eithne në përfundim të kësaj interviste, çfarë na këshillon si mund të bëjmë një jetë të shëndetshme?
To lifestyle changes, you know, it's important. I have noticed our diet in the United States is terrible. And I've also noticed, this is my third time to Albania, I have noticed a difference in the way people eat. The diet that you're supposed to use for Alzheimer's disease to protect from inflammation is the Mediterranean diet. However, I see this time in Albania that they have brought in more processed foods, more foods that are easier. They're not cooking the way they used to in the old way. There's more chemicals in the food and pesticides, and it's not being cleaned properly. So this causes the inflammation and the leaky gut. So it's very, very important that people are educated and they become advocates for their families, for a better lifestyle, and taking care of themselves and taking care of somebody at home with Alzheimer's is very, very difficult. They need to have time out to take care of themselves. There's a lot of guilt involved with taking care of an Alzheimer's patient. Mm-hmm. They feel like they're not doing enough for the loved one. So they become stressed and overwhelmed and burned out, and they actually can't do anything more for their loved one. And then they become depressed, and then things change. So it's important that we take care of ourselves and take care of the caretaker as well.
Eithne, shumë faleminderit për informacionet që na dhe dhe këshillat për sëmundjen e Alzheimer. Suksese edhe shumë bekime në punën tënde.
Thank you too, and I appreciate you interviewing me today.
Mos u largoni, rikthehemi sërish në studio me të tjerë të ftuar dhe me të tjera tema interesante.